Welcome. We're getting ready to go over lessons 101 through 104. This week, we're going to be getting into some fractions, a little bit of division, and measuring with centimeters. So before we get started, don't freak out on that division and fractions. It's not that bad. Let's go see what materials we need for this week. You're going to need the geared clock, a dry erase board, the worksheets, some glue and scissors, 2 sets of tangrams, the centimeter cubes, tiles, 4 identical transparent containers with straight sides, a pitcher of water, preferably colored, so it will be more visible. It doesn't have to be Kool-Aid, it could just be food coloring, and their abacus. Lesson 101, halves and fourths. Look at the objectives. Number 1 says to introduce halves and fourths through dividing. So yes, they're going to be working with fractions, and fractions is a form of division. So they're going to be getting a little division practice in today also. And we're dividing by 2. And that always is probably the simplest way to start learning about division and fractions, because we're just going to divide something in half. And most kids know their doubles, right? 8 plus 8 is 16. So if we have 16 of something and we need to divide it between 2 people, how many are they going to get? So although the word dividing and fractions can sound a little intimidating, right, starts really gentle the way they introduce it. So you'll see at the top of the second page, their worksheet is going to involve cutting. Might want to make another copy or 2 just in case you have a child that has a little bit of a struggle with cutting. And notice it says to cut out the 5 rectangles, but then it says in your lesson here, tell the child to set aside the 2 squares. Remind them that squares can also be called rectangles. It's just that a square is a perfect rectangle. It has all 4 sides even. Therefore, it has its own name, square. Lesson 102, fourths and quarters. So they have 2 more sums practice to do today. Remember, these are found in the back of the math journal in their worksheets. They'll be working with squares and circles and dividing them into fourths and learning about the term quarter. In the middle of the second page, there is a paragraph titled Right Angles, and you're going to be working with having your child try to visualize the tangram pieces and asking questions. For some children, they're going to be able to do this fairly easy, I think, maybe. For some, it may not. This all has to do with their spatial reasoning. And basically what spatial reasoning is the ability to think about the spatial relationships between 3-dimensional objects, to mentally picture and manipulate objects. Let me just say, this is not always easy for children. This is something I personally struggle with. I have some issues with my spatial reasoning, which is interesting because I love doing puzzles. I'm really good at doing puzzles. But to try to mentally see some shapes or to manipulate those shapes, I struggle. I say this because you may have children who struggle also, but always try to do it first the way the lesson is asking, and then, if need be, come in and bring those shapes in, and then ask again where the child can actually see those shapes to answer the questions. Lesson 103, finding quarter parts. This is a lesson where you're going to need those 4 identical containers that have straight sides that are transparent because they're going to be pouring stuff out of one cup into another cup. So I find that if you have canning jars, those work really well. Maybe you have other objects, baby jars, I don't know, something, but make sure they have straight sides, because a lot of times like coffee cups and stuff, they actually flare out a little bit. They're narrower at the bottom. They get wider at the top. This lesson is also where you need a pitcher of colored water, Well, you really just only need water, but if you could get it colored, that's even better because then it's easier to see. On the second page, in the middle paragraph about a quarter of 12, you're going to give the child 12 tiles, and then you're going to ask them to show you a quarter of them. Let them have to think through this for a little bit. Some children can process through and apply things that they know because, they know to divide it in half and then to divide it in half again. But not all children will remember that. So see what they can do first. Give them time to think it through. Then you can go in and lead them. Don't tell them what to do, though. Use what they've been learning and remind them to apply that to what they're doing. Last lesson for this week, lesson 104, measuring with centimeters. They're going to be using the centimeter cubes to measure the tangram sides to determine the length of all the different sides of the tangrams. The explanation to the teacher that's on that first page is interesting. It talks about how children, when asked to measure with various non-standard units, are often confused. Meaning, if you're not using standard units, like say, let's use paper clips to measure something. Let's use our hands to measure something or our feet. You can see when you use objects like that, why we need standard measuring units. So you may want to do that just for fun with your kids on an item. How many hands is that? Well, you know what? What's going to happen if you're measuring with your hand, your child's measuring with their hand? They're going to have a lot more hands involved than you because their hands are smaller. So that's a great way to show we're using a unit of measurement, hands, but they're not standard, are they? Because they're different sizes. And that's why it's important to have a standard unit of measurement so that everybody is measuring with the same standard. Of course, that's probably a little bit more than your children need to know, but you may have some children who are interested. So if they are, explore. Have them use some different units of measurement. So you're going to be giving your children tangram pieces and they're going to be measuring it with the centimeter cubes. Some children are going to realize that some of the lengths are the same, so they're not going to feel the need to use the centimeter cubes to measure. That's okay. Some children will need to do that, and that's okay. I am someone who, even if you told me what the measurement is, sometimes I like to measure it just to make sure from my own sense. And you may have children like that also. They need to know for themselves, not just by looking. And especially for people like myself with the spatial reasoning struggle, I always like to verify. So don't be surprised if you may have children like that also. And then part of their worksheet is about data. And they're going to learn about that term and how he can organize it on the chart to keep track of it. All right, we're done for this week. See, I told you the division and the fractions wasn't going to be quite as intimidating as it sounds. I really appreciate how Right Start takes things that the children have been learning, concepts they've been learning, and now we're going to apply it in some different ways. And they're still reinforcing the things that they're learning, their addition and the mental math and everything. And now we get to use it a little bit of a different way, like measuring the tangram pieces, getting to pour water into cups to see the difference. Anyway, should be a nice week this week, just dabbling in all the different areas. So enjoy your week. And join me next week as we go over lessons 105 to 108. Until then.